Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the RotoViz Best Ball Show. My name is Colm Kelly. You can see I'm joined by Zachary Krueger, and we're also joined today by Justin Herzig. We're going to draft a Best Ball Mania 3 team. We're going to have a little bit of fun here. We are joined by the Best Ball Mania 1 winner, so we'll get his thoughts on what it takes to try and win BBM3 this year. We'll get some takes on that. We were also fortunate enough, I got to meet up with Zach. This is the first show, Zach, we've done since I was over in the US. We got to head up to the expo together, and then obviously that's where we met up with Justin. Both yourself and Justin headed up a best ball panel at the expo, which I thought you've done a superb job on. But I have to keep the mannerly thing in. I have to welcome the guests to the show before we do get to Zach. Justin, welcome to the stream.
I appreciate it. Thank you. No, yeah, that was a fantastic, fun panel, fun weekend in Canton, and great to be back into the thick of things and doing some best ball drafts.
Yeah, so we're going to have fun jumping in a couple of minutes into the BBM tree, as I mentioned. Zach, you mentioned here, and I'll let you take it away. You said you're going to take the advice from the winner of the BBM1 rather than the runner-up of the FFPC tournament last year. So I'll let you get Justin's thoughts on what we need to do to win the tournament here.
Yeah, well, I did make the point that obviously behind the camera, I'm well known at this point in time for not always going with Colm's favorite picks. It'll usually mean the guest against him once in a while, and I said it's going to be even easier this time because we've got the silver medalist in the FFPC from last year, and then we have Herzig, who's actually been a gold medalist before. So it's not looking good for Colm for me to not side with him for a few more picks here. But you mentioned winning the BBM3. It's been a big tournament that's been going on all off season. Herzig, as you've I assume gotten in a few drafts here, what's kind of your read of the landscape so far? And what do you think it's going to take to bonk this thing again?
Yeah, no, it's been interesting. And last year we really had a lot of quick reactions and kind of hyper reactions to that hyper fragile build. And it really felt like, hey, just because that one team of mine ended up winning, a lot of people really tried to force that structure. And it just didn't work out too well because people then were, not reacting to the room. And you started having running backs that historically would go in the 10th, 11th, or going to the 14th, 15th. So you saw that, hey, that year, maybe we should have adapted that 5 running back build. This year, I think it's fun again. I think there's definitely been some overreaction around some of the kind of stacking aspects with the week 17. I think hey, I'm all for it, but there's ways to do it the right way and the wrong way. I think there's some aspects around just kind of some roster construction. And then for me, the number one thing has been kind of leaning into the uncertainty this year. It feels like each year, and definitely this year, there, whether it's new team changes, new coaching changes, rookies, that wide range of outcomes, I want to lean into that uncertainty to aim for those highest upside scenarios.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And you mentioned some of the overreaction. You mentioned, obviously there's a lot of talk this year around the correlation, the week 17. I think that has probably swung too far to one side, but we'll see how we balance it throughout. Is that something that you're looking to do? I've mentioned lots of times, I'm looking to correlate where it fits. I'm not looking to force ADPs. I've been doing some drafts over at the FFPC over the last couple of days, and I'm seeing some picks. There was somebody actually critiqued my roster yesterday to say, Zach, that I didn't draft Devin Singletary. I had to say that it was a super flex draft where he went at the 701, which is obviously insane at this point. But, when we're looking at these balances of what people are trying to do to correlate lineups, I think if you're doing that to the detriment of ADP, it's really putting you in a hole. Are you trying to, and I think this was something you mentioned at the expo, that you're trying to kind of target the offenses rather than the correlations?
Yeah, I mean, I think the correlation part is very important. Right when that Underdog announcement came out with the large field of 469, I think it is, for that week 17, I was like, hey, this is going to be important. And last year we started doing it as well. And so last year I had a team that was in first for the Millie for the DraftKings up until that kind of final late stretch, and still finished fourth. But the reason why it finished so high is because I went full on that Cincinnati, Kansas City game stack. And it was interesting because in that game I had Burrow, I had Chase. Those two smashed. I also had Higgins. I also had Tyreek Hill. Both those two were virtually worthless. But then I also had Darrell Williams. And the only way I ever drafted Darrell Williams last year was because it was probably that 19th, 20th round, and it was that correlation in that week 17. So I want to make it clear, I'm all on week 17 correlation. What I think has been interesting is how it has impacted the actual ADP, especially in the higher up areas. So one example is, I think, Gabriel Davis. I'm all on team Gabriel Davis. Early on, I was in the summer, I was like, hey, I think I'm going to be able to get him his value and stuff. What started happening with Gabriel Davis is you have 5 guys being drafted ahead of him that are all in that week 17 game with him. So we see, okay, if you grab Stephon Diggs, if you grab Josh Allen, those guys are reaching for Gabe Davis, so that pulls him up. But then you also have the ones who drafted Joe Mixon, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins, and they want Gabe Davis for that week 17 stack partner. So now they're fighting for him. Historically, you only have really one team that early that's going to be saying, hey, I want this correlation, so I'm going to maybe reach or at least grab an ADP. Here, you've got 2 competitors who are both going for different stacks, reaching for the same type of player, and that draws the ADP up and it keeps going. And so Gabe Davis is just one example, but there's a bunch of them like this. And I think this is going to be the first year that we look back and ADP is not going to be as predictive as it has been the last couple of years. Because historically, if you look, there's a trend where we've become more informed, we can become better at projections, there's more information out there. And so in general, ADP is very predictive of future performance. I think we're going to see some outliers this year because of the correlation. And then the corollary to that is your wide receivers that are in either week 17 game environments or have a QB that is going very late are dropping a lot. And I think Jahan Dotson is a great example. Like what? First round draft pick, absolute stud. Doesn't have the dynasty profile that a lot of people like because he spent a little more time in college, but he still has that first round talent. But because no one already has Carson Wentz, no one already has the QB, Deshaun Watson, or whatever you're looking at for Cleveland. No one's reaching for him. So now we see him continuing to fall. Nothing has changed about his actual projections or what we expect out of him. But just because of the way people are building their lineups, you've got guys who there isn't a fight for them because no one has them in their week 17 or their team stack.
You summed that up really, really well. I'm 100% on board with how you said that. The other thing that we've touched on Gabriel Davis a few times, the interesting thing with him this year is I don't think I've ever seen this with a player where in redraft and in best ball, he is more expensive than he is in dynasty as a young player who should be ascending, which is usually a thing to say that we have overcorrected as a market at that point. We will jump into the draft in just 1 second, but I have a question here as well for people drafting maybe the Pomeranian from Cody. How important is correlation in smaller tournaments like the Pomeranian? I'm going to take this and I'll see if you agree with it. When I'm drafting, particularly in the FFPC, one of the things I like is they are smaller fields. You're getting to the final, for example, in the Superflex tournament, it's like a 30-man field. The actual week 17 isn't as valuable there. I think it's important, but I don't think it is. Like, I think the field size matters as to how much you want to implement it. So I would still be trying to do because it is advantageous where possible. But if it's a case that you're in a smaller field, I don't think it's as important as we see in, for example, BBM3. Would you agree with that, Justin?
Yeah, so I think the RotoViz tools that you guys have around best ball, those are most indicative and helpful for advancing because the outliers and the theoretical aspects around like how do you win a 469 person field, like past data is not really going to help you that much. But what your tools do help with is how I can actually project my chances of advancing. And in a smaller tournament, that advance rate is the most important factor. So I'm just caring about how do I make sure I get out of my initial pod for that smaller tournament because you don't have to care as much about this crazy high upside in week 17. Now, when we look at that, correlation does still matter. Correlation is still, I want to make a bet on an offense because if I'm correct with that offense, then I'm likely going to be correct and hitting ADP values on multiple guys. So I still do want to correlate, but like the week 17 correlation doesn't matter as much. So you got to be a bit smarter about it. But I'd say there still is positive data that shows that there's positive correlation in taking multiple players of the same team and increasing your chances of advancing.
Yeah, and I probably misspoken. I do, when I was talking correlation there, I was talking the week 17 playoff structure, but yeah, 100% for the team element. But I also think that checking in, there's always, if we talk about, league settings, scoring settings, the one thing that we do always need to check in those is like the advance for a tournament. So the FFPC too, a lot of the time you only have to come 2 out of 12 to advance to the next week. Whereas in something like this, some of the weeks there's massive fields that we're trying to even advance in the playoffs. But we are going to bounce in. We're going to jump straight in. Just as we are setting that up, Zach, I just want to mention if you aren't following Justin on Twitter already, it is at JustinHerzig. That is HERZIG. You can check out Zach on Twitter at ZK_FFB. And I'm over in the Twitter space at Overtime Ireland. We're going to talk a little bit more about what Justin has got going on later in the show. But the important thing I think to talk about now is what we're going to see here when we get that draft slot and what we're going to plan to do. So Zach, you can hit us with that information as to where we're kicking things off here.
Yeah, so we are starting at the 108 for this one. A little bit different from our usual. I feel like most of our drafts, we've somehow managed to get a top 3 pick here. So we're picking out the 108. It's going to be a little bit different of an approach than probably what we've done in a few of these other ones. Herzig, is this a spot that you're usually targeting wide receiver or running back? Do you like the elite tight end and Travis Kelce? If he happens to make it to us, where are you usually looking to target players at this point in the draft? And is there any method to the madness?
I usually just log out and just hope to get a new draft pick next time.
Yeah.
Let's do
that.
No.
We'll auto draft this one and we'll jump into another one.
Exactly.
I think 7's the worst. I think 8th is the second worst from a draft pick this year. It puts me in a weird position where am I going to go Diggs or Dalvin? I'm highly leveraged on Dalvin right now, just because I think there is that range of outcomes that he could become that RB1. I think early on in the offseason where people were scared about a suspension aspect, he might get more use in the passing game. It's such a highly concentrated. So in general, Dalvin's kind of who I'm looking at there. I do love Diggs, but my challenge with Diggs is if you're going to draft Diggs early, you then have to draft Josh Allen pretty early as well. And then if you want to go for the correlation like Gabe Davis, there are so many teams that have that exact either Allen Diggs or Allen Diggs Davis that not only are you maybe reaching a bit on QB, maybe not, but like you have no uniqueness with your team because it's so easy. Like the ADP literally fits perfectly to get that stack because the Diggs owner wants Josh Allen. So that's one of the reasons I've also been fading it a little because it's just, even though I like Diggs where he is at that 8 feels fair for the larger structure of what my team ends up looking like. I'm either very similar to a ton of other teams, my elite guys, or I'm guaranteeing that I'm not going to get my stack partner, which isn't the best either.
Yeah, you kind of almost, if you wanted to get unique there, you almost need to take your second pick to be T. Higgins and take him ahead of value and then try to go with Joe Burrow, maybe to flex things up. But the one thing I was going to say, when you get to that 7-8 spot, you're really hoping that you get people ahead of you to draft some players that you're not wanting to get, that maybe one of those top options like a Chase slips to you, but that's unlikely to happen. Austin Eckler has gone off the board as well as Kupp and Jefferson. The dream here would be the Chase would slide. I don't feel like it's going to happen. I haven't drafted Dalvin Cook a huge amount. Najee Harris goes off the board. Are we one pick away from Jamar Chase here? Or would we take Chase?
Nah.
So we're back to the original conversation. So I'm open, as we said, we'll lean towards the guest pick here. My running backs that I would be targeting here would be Saquon Barkley or DeAndre Swift. But if you want to go with Cook, I'll go the Cook route.
Yeah, I think the challenge, let's go with Cook. And I think the challenge of going with like a Saquon Barkley or DeAndre Swift or anything is, I was drafting Saquon Barkley in the third round for a ton of the BBM. Yeah. And so I'm not going to be taking him in the second here, even though like, if you had to ask me like, who would I like better to have a better season, Saquon or DeAndre Swift? Probably maybe lean Saquon. It's pretty damn close. But what I do know is that if Saquon has that monster season and he's the guy you need and you get him there, well, a ton of other people already got him with Christian McCaffrey and Leonard Fournette or something. So like you're basically putting yourself in a bind in your best case scenario. I'd rather get DeAndre Swift, hope for that best case later on as that second round, or here, if Dalvin Cook ends up being the guy you need, you're not giving anything up by getting him there.
Yeah, the other thing that's possible when you do that, Derrick Henry goes off the board then at the 112, is there is a possibility that one of those guys that I talked about come back to you here. So Cook, if is the running back we want to go for, I would have probably edged it towards a wide receiver, but we'll see how it plays out. One note that we'll wait till we get past this pick, but you did have a tweet earlier today talking about Cordarrelle Patterson and the draft slot that he has. Somebody I wasn't targeting early in drafts, but his ADP has slid down a little bit. So we'll touch on him in a little bit, but I did joke that we could have went with a zero RB roster with Patterson as our option there, but that is no longer an option, but he could be our RB2. We could hold out. What's your feeling here as Barkley has gone off the board? What Swift would be an option? And then you're into the kind of the tier of Mike Evans, Tyreek Hill, AJ Brown.
So I'd probably go Aaron Jones here and go for that week 17 correlation with Minnesota, Green Bay. And I think that, it actually isn't from, I was looking through my drafts and stuff, and because some people were like, oh, well, you can always get those two. So like, it's probably going to be high owned, but like, it's not actually. Not many people want to start running back.
Yeah.
Not many. Yeah.
similar to some of the, people are hesitant in DFS as well to stack, the RB1 on both lineups to try and see how the game will play out. But we did actually a draft with JJ Zachary, and I believe in that one we went Dalvin Cook, but we passed on Aaron Jones, Zach, and we were regretting it later on because we should have went that way to get the correlation in week 17. So I think it's an interesting start. We are 2 running backs deep. We're hoping we see in my opinion here, I'm hoping to see a line of green just back and forth here till it gets back to us. But what's your opinion on where we have started off? I am open to, if a running back did come back to us, to start off with 3 running backs and then line it up then after that with the other positions. But what are you normally targeting if you go running back through those first 2 rounds?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm agreeing with you. Even if James Conner's there, I probably still pass because I think there's better wide receivers. If one of your, we were seeing Javonte fall there, Leonard Fournette. Like if one of those ended up falling, like I think so. I think for the most part, this next area there's a lot of wide receivers I really like. We're in that area, so around the kind of 6th round is where you may be able to get like a Kyler or a Hurts kind of falling. Other than that, we don't have like a big stack that we're building right now. So it probably makes sense to kind of get our wide receivers here, figure out if we go with a Cousins Rodgers a bit later for that stack aspect.
How are you feeling, Zach? We have one person has commented in that the Bollock said he just signed in. What the heck is going on? So obviously that's because we've gone with 2 running backs to start. But how are you feeling? The running backs we've got, I think, are very strong. I haven't drafted much Aaron Jones this year. I do think that, and this is an ongoing joke on Twitter with people, that players have been drafted at their ceiling. We talked about Gabe Davis. That is something that continuously pops up. But it feels like injury may already be priced into the Aaron Jones price, for example, if it was a case that A.J. Dillon missed time. But in this particular lineup, I like what we've done with the 2 running backs to start. Who are some of your prime targets here as we wrap around at this point to see who comes back? Obviously, 2 of our favorites and AJ Brown, T. Higgins are off the board, but we would have expected that.
Yeah, around that area, DJ Moore I've been getting a bunch of. Waddle, even sometimes you can even fall to the wraparound there at 41, but I like both those wide receivers. Let's see. I haven't been doing too much of the LAC guys, but neither of them are off the board. So it'll be interesting if 1 or 2 of those fall. Looks like Pittman is falling a bit as well. We're probably going to be able to get a nice ADP value on one of these wide receivers based off what we've just seen.
Yeah. How are you feeling, Zach? Obviously, Zach is the key man here. He doesn't like to show the queue until we're right up against it. But who are some of your options, or are you keeping that close to your best here?
I mean, Herzig touched on a lot of the guys who I think I'm kind of eyeing up here as well. So we should be good to go as far as that goes. The one point that I did want to make that I liked with the running back start was that certainly, drafting these running backs depending on the running backs, at least can be a little bit risky on the, on that kind of play. But the one thing I like about these backs in particular is not only are they dynamic backs, but they also both have pass catching upside, which I think makes them a little less risky to stack 2 running backs and correlating games later on in the week. I think that even if it ends up being like a high scoring game, there's going to be pass catching options available to us that makes them a little bit safer of a play. So I really like the way we started that. We're now on the clock. I got Sutton, DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, and Jalen Waddle queued up. Is there anyone else we should be targeting here, or what are we thinking?
I think you've got a good list up there. I would put Keenan Allen a slight tier above the others, but don't feel too strongly if there's one you really like.
No, I'm fine with doing Allen. You go with that, Colm?
We have 3 seconds left, so I'll say yes.
So yeah, cool, awesome.
And also Keenan Allen, like you're getting some ADP value there with a 32nd. A lot of times he's actually being drafted around that kind of 25th, 27th range. So a little uniqueness aspect there that's not horrible. The second is that when we are going to be doing we don't have that elite wide receiver here. And so I know a lot of people are kind of shied away from Keenan Allen because getting a little older, but he's still tied to Justin Herbert. He still is the alpha in that offense. And I think his median projection with a strong upside still makes him like that better play just from an offensive standpoint. Well, yeah, Sutton, DJ Moore may have higher upside, but there's also substantial risk that Keenan Allen's not carrying.
Yeah, and when I'll hold my hands up, and I've mentioned this before. I'm strongly Mike Williams ahead of Keenan Allen. Williams obviously went one pick before. He would have been my option. Just checking with you, Justin, are you one or the other? And the reason then that I don't mind taking Allen in some drafts is we're always wrong. We're often wrong. And in that case, that if it is Keenan Allen, you want to have some exposure to that as well.
Yeah, I'm just probably going off ADP with those two. I have Keenan Allen a tad bit higher, and it's just because what we saw the majority of the second half of the season with how they used Mike versus Keenan leaned on the Keenan side. But like if we get what happened for those first, I don't know, it was 5-6 week with Mike Williams last year, like he can just absolutely smash. And so Mike Williams does have a bit of an upside that Keenan Allen does not have. And so completely understand wanting to grab him, especially in this kind of a tournament format.
And I have one player that I really want us to get back here, but I don't know if it's going to happen. We'll see. We have a couple of picks. We have one pick to go. I have a clear candidate here to draft, but what interesting to see some of the other draft picks. We might head on those in a couple of moments. We did see Gabriel Davis go off the board before both those Chargers wide receivers. You also mentioned earlier, having to take Diggs and then try and get Josh Allen. Josh Allen went in the third round in this one as well to pair up with Diggs. So some interesting drafts to kick things off. The pick here I want, and he could also come back, is Jalen Waddle, unless anyone has a strong opinion against that. I think he's the clear pick here in this tier.
100% agree. Absolutely love Waddle. I'm looking right now. My exposure to him is, I'm at 19%, and my average draft pick of him is right at ADP at 37.5.
Okay. We get him at 41 there, which is obviously nice, and he is quickly ramped up to one of my highest exposures at this current moment in time. But when we took Keenan Allen, my pitch was going to be to take DJ Moore or Jalen Waddle. So for Waddle to come back there, that was going to be the thing. So you mentioned not having an elite wide receiver, but I think then when you have two options in Allen and Waddle, you have one player who could potentially ascend into that elite tier, and you have somebody else who's descending out of it, but still has the upside in the best ball format to put up some big games. So I like getting those two options there. The player I have actually started drafting a little bit more is Terry McLaurin, which I had been completely off. I haven't really been drafting Allen Robinson at all. And then I would take Jerry Jeudy, but I do feel he's more of a back end of that round pick. How are you feeling so far, Zach, with our 2-2 start here? I think all things considered, we're off to a pretty dynamic option with a lot of flexibility now to be going through out here.
Yeah, we have, obviously we mentioned the two great running backs already. We have a wide receiver and a great offense and Keenan Allen. And then I think we have a great wide receiver and Jalen Waddle. Maybe great's a little bit too strong, but I think he's very good. Very good wide receiver in Jalen Waddle, who we hope is going to be an ascending offense. And I think that a wide receiver like Waddle is the kind of guy that you take him here as essentially a low end wide receiver too, and there's probably a scenario where if that Dolphins offense takes a step forward this season in year 2 under, or I guess year 3 under Tua, but also with Mike McDaniel, that maybe Waddle somehow rises past his ADP a little bit, turns in a little bit better of a performance when we drafted him at, and that makes for a very solid pick here for us. So I like that. Taking shots on good players and good situations is never a bad thing, and I think getting Waddle here is a nice pick.
He also has a left-handed quarterback who throws the ball like that rather than. I don't know if everyone has seen the head coach's interview, but yeah, I find it. He's an interesting character. That's, I think, the way I'll leave it. But it is also, I think, the discount that you get on Waddle versus Tyreek Hill. So Tyreek Hill goes mid-second round in this draft, and then you get basically a full 2.5 round discount on Jalen Waddle. I think that those guys should be much, much closer in terms of ADP. And I have drafted Waddle ahead of Hill in a few leagues this year, which was obviously ahead of ADP. 3 quarterbacks go off the board here, and Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, and Justin Herbert. We are moving now 3 picks away from our next selection. Any options, Zach, that you've lined up in the queue? It's always interesting to memorize by ADP as to who our options are as we're looking at the draft board.
Let's see what we got here. So I just kind of threw a cast of characters in here. Deontay Johnson, I think, is just a tremendous value here. I like Deontay Johnson any and every season. Probably for the next 5 years, I'll be drafting Deontay Johnson. So I'll always try to get him. I'm not sure where you guys are at on this pick, but Johnson's almost a 10-pick value, which I think looks pretty nice.
Yeah, and I'll echo with Deontay as well. We saw that Pickens' average depth of target, I think, was actually 2 yards shorter than what Big Ben was last year. So I don't think that, hey, if Pickett gets that job, or really even if Trubisky, that they're going to just turn into a completely downfield passing offense. And so that's really good news for Deontay. And yeah, I think Deontay is just that not sexy pick that people are thinking Kenny Pickens. People are thinking who's the quarterback. People are thinking there's just too many mouths to feed. And I think all those things are completely valid, but that's why Deontay is in the 5th and not the 3rd. Like if we were going off previous production, he would have been a 3rd rounder.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. If he had a better quarterback, he's going 2 rounds earlier in this format. Like I think that he is, as a talent, he falls into that DJ Moore bracket of never, well, he has had Ben Roethlisberger, but not having a quarterback this season is dinging his value, whereas we've seen that with DJ Moore. In the past, we just haven't had that quarterback production. We are going to be waiting now, back on the clock pretty soon, about 6 picks time. There is somebody that will be a clear target for me that was on your list, Zach, but we'll see how it plays out as it does come back. Somebody else who also may or may not have a good quarterback this year. The other player that I would have in that tier.
Yeah, there he went.
That's not who Colm was on. I like Kittle here too.
Yeah, I would like Kittle as well, but we'll pretend that was the player, so people don't try and draft him. In that tier there, though, I do think that Rashad Bateman is very close to Deontay Johnson as well. Is he somebody you're drafting in that kind of Cook, Amon-Ra, Chris Godwin tier?
Yeah, I think I like the other wide receivers better than Bateman, just with that offense and how they want to utilize it. I know we're back on the clock. I want to give my tight end take in a second. Yeah, I think it's a reach on tight end. It's a reach on QB when we're not stacking. We don't need a running back, so I'm good with. I love Elijah Moore. Yeah, I think he'd be my clear pair.
Colm wanted Metcalf, but Colm is also going to pine for Ayuk here. I know. Are you good with Ayuk, or is there somewhere else you'd rather go with this pick, Justin?
Oh, we missed out. Sorry, I thought we were on the clock with Moore. Sorry, you go ahead.
No, he got sniped right before. I am okay with Ayuk here.
Drake London would be my other name if you didn't.
Oh, do we want to do London?
I'd probably go Drake over Ayuk, but okay. I'm fine with either.
Let's do it. Well, why not?
Sorry, I thought we were on the clock when we were talking about Elijah.
No, we just missed him.
I think the thing with Ayuk as well is we knew that we weren't going to have Trey Lance fall back to us on the turn, so you weren't getting that stack there. Why I really liked Kittle. So we're in an interesting situation in this is we are highly unlikely to get 2 tight ends or 2 QBs that we really feel good about. So we're almost, if we could have got Kittle, then we could have set ourselves up for a 3-3-4-8 or like a 3-5-8. Without getting Kittle, like we're in that weird situation where we might end up having to go 3-3 on the onesies positions. And because if you look at our QBs, like from a stack partner, we still could get the Cousins, Rodgers, Tuas. And maybe if you grab 2 of those 3, you're happy with going with 2. But I think we're pretty clear in the any tight ends we grab, we're going to just go going for mostly like 3 late tight ends.
Yeah.
There is some late tight ends that I am confident in 2 tight end builds in, so we'll see if we get to that point. But yeah, I do agree. We're usually trying to get one of those elite tight ends and then give you that little bit of flexibility. But there is some options that may come up here. I do like Brandon Ayuk a lot, but I also like Drake London a lot, and I like Elijah Moore a lot. So in that tier, there's a good few options. The ones that I am not really drafting at all this year are Adam Thielen and Michael Thomas. People will notice a theme with the veteran wide receivers. I usually bypass those guys, but that could be to my detriment, but I'm making bets on those other guys. We did miss out. Trey Lance did go 1 pick later, so I did agree with passing on Ayuk. It's interesting that when there is a pick that I do like, that Zach is setting it up with, is there any other players we can draft instead of the guy that Colm likes? So I always enjoy that element of the draft. But we are coming back here now into the 8th round, and the writing's very small, but I am correct. We are in the 8th round. We are in the 7th round.
Seventh round.
Yeah, it's so small on my screen here. But what way are you thinking about playing it? You mentioned, obviously we have to see what options are there, but you also we have 2 running backs to start things off. Are we looking with those 2 elite running backs, if we get 2 pretty solid options, to go with 4 running backs, or are you trying to push that out to 5?
I think you could, but however, I'd likely end up saying, hey, like right now in that, let's say Nyheim Hines to Michael Carter zone, I love so many of those running backs that often I can say, hey, I'm going to wait and grab 3 in that range. And then I'd rather go with the 2 and the 3 later and stack this with more wide receivers, because we are a bit behind the 8 ball on wide receiver as just not getting 1 or 2 of those kind of first, second rounders. And so this is, I think, where there's a big tier drop off. When you start grabbing those Nyheim Hines, Darrell Henderson, the wide receivers really drop off. But here we still have so many guys with substantial upside. And Tony is my absolute smash favorite play at this spot.
I like that. You go with that, Colm?
Yep.
It
doesn't matter if I'm good with it or not. Just draft it.
No. That does matter. Colm.
Yeah. Some direction on Tony here. I think all the signs are pointing to he's going to be the clear alpha in that offense as long as he can keep his head straight and stay healthy. With Golladay not being able to get separation, not really sure if his mind's still in it, not sure what's going on there. Some hints towards some of the practice squad, or at least like late string guys, are not only likely going to make the team, but may actually see some playing time. I think that's a nod to Galladay's job is a little, not fully in jeopardy, but like it's not as secure as we think. Sterling Shepard also coming off the pup is, I think, just more indications that like, hey, there's a lot of confusion in the back end, but at the top, the separation between Tony and the rest is just immense. And so I think he could have the 160 target game. And if Daboll and that offense really do take that step forward, then Tony's going to be an absolute smash. And last part is, with this team we're building, grabbing Daniel Jones is actually a strong fit for a 3 QB build.
Yeah.
Just looking at the team 12, just looking at, they have built up Travis Kelce, Sky Moore, and now Marquez Valdes-Scantling in those last 2 back-to-back picks, but obviously they don't have Patrick Mahomes in that roster. They do have Jalen Hurts, which a little bit interesting. Derek Carr goes off the board. We are 2 picks away. Dak Prescott goes off the board. Let's flip the queue back up. There is something I want to circle back to. You mentioned your tight end take, and we didn't get that, so we'll circle back to that in a moment. But who are some of the options here, 1 pick away, that you're hoping come back to us? And we did talk about the stack options. There is, obviously, if you go with the Packers, there's an opportunity to stack up a little bit later, but there is some quarterbacks here like Tom Brady, Russell Wilson, but they're not really fitting what we're doing here so far.
Okay. I was actually going to think Russell Wilson was a potential just for the value and to stack. Now with him gone, it's kind of ugly. I put the CEH out yesterday. I do like CEH a lot. I think he could be a league winner where his value is. And if we wanted to at least give ourselves optionality for a 4RB build, that's up there.
I would go Hawkinson, but we'll go CEH if you want.
I'm good with either.
We'll do CH. I'm not going to have enough time to switch it out here, so we'll go with CH there.
What's talk to me Hawkinson, because I've not been taking any Hawkinson just because I consider the dead zone right now with tight end, where the difference between Hawkinson and Tyler Higbee is not worth it. 7 rounds of difference.
7 rounds is a lot, but I think that one of the things is I do think the offense for the Lions is going to be much better this season. I have been betting a little bit on that. We were looking at potential quarterbacks options. We would be able to get Goff very, very late if we did go that way. I think that they're going to be behind in quite a few games, but we've seen that last year that both him and Swift put up a lot of points in garbage time. You can't really bet on that every single season, but we have seen that be an element of fantasy success for both running backs and tight ends over the history of, I guess, fantasy football. So that is the play. I also think that by talent and skill level, I think that he is much closer to that top tier than his ADP would indicate. I think that he is better by a distance than Dalton Schultz, and I would think that he should be right in around the Darren Waller, George Kittle range, because there is uncertainty around both of those guys based on Kittle getting the workload that he's hoping, and then Darren Waller, obviously, with Devontae Adams coming into town and has a lingering hamstring issue at the moment. I'm guessing that you're saying that the guys behind him are closer to him than they are shown by ADP, but I think that he should be in that range where we see Kittle and Waller go in this particular draft, because I think as a former first-round tight end, there's a huge amount of upside that is still untapped, and I think this is the best offense that he's going to play in.
Yep, I think that's fair. I think on a PPR site or tight end premium, I'm even more willing because tight end, touchdown is so important in underdog scoring, and I don't think that he's going to have that much of an increase in that Detroit offense. That yes, they're going to be throwing more, but I don't think like his touchdown upside is really there. That's probably my one hesitation. But it is interesting. It's like, what's the real difference between TJ Hawkinson and Noah Fant? Not counting the whole Will Dissly stuff that happened the past couple of days. But
Noah Fant is one of those lit round tight ends. I mentioned that I'm happy to go with a 2 tight end build if we get him. So I was kind of thinking the flexibility it also gives you if you have him in there. But obviously, if there's a difference between what your take on him is as that kind of. I think he is basically in that elite tight end tier. He's the last one that I'd be willing to take, even though there is a dip in the tiers. But the guy we did take was Clyde Edwards-Helaire. You mentioned you put out a tweet on him over the last couple of days. What's your thoughts on Edwards-Helaire based on the current situation? I actually think that his ADP should also be dropping a lot more than it is based on the Pacheco information.
So, I mean, I think the Pacheco information, if anything, just gives us more confirmation that CEH is the guy. I think what we saw with the signing of Rojo and such, and like the way that we projected him before this season or before preseason and such was like, hey, Rojo has X% chance of taking workload. Rojo's expected volume is going to be this. That's pretty much completely gone. Like Rojo's likely not going to make the team. If he does, like there's no confidence there. I don't think CEH ever got a bump for that. Instead, Pacheco comes in, and really what we're seeing with Pacheco is like, hey, he's a sixth round draft pick. The talent is snazzy in like preseason and such, but I don't see him just completely taking over that CEH workload. I think, yes, McKinnon's still going to play a role and take some of that passing down work, but I think from your range of outcomes, all right, we're up now. From the range of outcomes on that offense, I think it's too early for Patterson. What do you think about Dawson Knox if you want to give yourself some flexibility with the tight end?
We also get a little Miami correlation there, I think.
All right. Or we could start going for like Rodgers to get our first QB with Aaron Jones.
I'd probably go that way.
That'd probably be my lean.
All right, let's do that. I had all these receivers who got drafted in there, and that got tough very quickly as I just watched everyone I loaded into the queue evaporate. Heads up, you can turn it off at any point.
So say okay, and then just go. Yeah, this was their new feature where if you let the queue go twice, which is a good feature overall, but
it is. Yeah, that's the first time.
It's a little annoying.
That's the first time I've had that happen. So I was like, did I just ruin everything? But we're good. We're good.
Okay. So we do go with Rodgers there. The question I would have is obviously, I'm not in on Dawson Knox at all.
I'm not really either, but yeah.
So my take there, and look, Zach will laugh at this, and obviously there is the option to draft James Cook as well, but I would usually go for a Buffalo Bills running back there, and then I would have went in hindsight with Hawkinson in the last round to get a tight end and a running back that way. Are you in on either of the Bills running backs versus Edwards-Helaire?
So I was on Singletary earlier on because I thought he was just substantial value. I've slowed on him because of the Zach Moss news, and it really sounds like Zach Moss is going to have some form of role. I still love James Cook, and I think he's the best talent on that team. And like from a playoff structure, he could be very well. There is a player that I really like that I think is a substantial value. It actually is a crazy value. If he falls to us here, we shall see.
I like that I did get a comment there. I said either, and they do mention that there is 3 Buffalo Bills running backs. There's 2 that I'm substantially interested in.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, you guys know that I love Cordero.
I'm good with that. Is that who you're talking about here?
No, I can say it now because of the lag. Damian Harris. His fall has been insane. There's no reason. Like he's still the go-to guy there. He's actually been playing a little more in the pass down work as well. A lot of it was just around like Ramondre Stevenson hype because there was that quote around the James White. But like, if there's a range of outcomes, there's a chance that Damian Harris actually takes that pass catching role combined with the amount of touchdowns and their run heavy aspect. Like he could be a complete smash. And when we now look at this team, we've got 4 very solid running backs, all legit starters with legit workloads, different bye weeks. I think this is a great 4RB team that we did not devote too much capital to.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
We got on the last 2 picks, we've got roughly 20 picks of value on the last 2 running back picks. Yeah. That's pretty solid.
So I'll say that I've been drafting Stevenson more than Harris, but based on the build here, and the other question I had for you was, you mentioned they don't have crossover bye weeks. If we had taken Patterson, we would have 2 week 14 bye weeks. I think that's a very sensible call on this, but does that there now mean that we are set at 4 and we're sticking with 4 running backs?
I think so, unless like there's some crazy substantial value. But even if like Patterson fell to us in the 11th tier, I think it's more important that we shore up the other positions. Like these are Jones, Cook, CEH, and Damian Harris. And you're drafting CH and Damian Harris with that they're going to have this strong role in those teams. Like those are really 4 great RBs for a 4RB build.
And one of the things I'll say about those 2 guys is, obviously there's players in Stevenson obviously is going ahead of Harris in this particular draft. But those are the type of running backs that in previous years, you touched on at the start about drafters getting smarter, but they would have been, 4 rounds higher. They would have been right in the dead zone. Whereas now when they're going in this kind of, I call it like the 0 RB kind of zone, like there is reason to take your shots on those and not be overconfident in player takes, especially when they're falling as much after ADP as they did. But people often talk about bye weeks and looking at bye weeks. But I do think in a situation like that, if you're going to limit the positions to say 4 running backs, it really is advantageous to try not to have crossover bye weeks. In that situation, Zach, your guy Brian Robinson goes here at the 11:01. What is going on in this award? What have you done, Zach, to fantasy football drafters over the last, 8 weeks?
Yeah, I don't know if I steamed up Brian Robinson or if Ron Rivera did, but I've got about 42% Brian Robinson. That was probably all 16th round or later value. A lot of times I was just taking shots on the 18th round. So
this started off as a bet.
I'm probably out of I'm probably out on him at this point in time, but I'm fine with what I got.
You can maybe give Zach credit. You can maybe give Ron credit. I think you really got to give Antonio Gibson all the credit. Like he's the real reason that Robinson's able to get steamed.
Because at one point it was kind of a case of like we're in the last couple of picks of the 18th round. Who do we take here? And Zach obviously had control, so he kept taking Brian Robinson. But man, that is some steam to move you up there to the 11:01. We are 3 picks away. We're set up at running back here. We have Aaron Rodgers. Since we did take Aaron Rodgers, a couple of picks later, Romeo Dubes did go off the board. So we will look at some late options possibly to stack with him. But how are you feeling at this point off the draft, Justin?
Yeah, so I mean, I don't hate it. I definitely like to have an elite QB or tight end, and we're lacking there. But because we only have, let's think through here. I think Josh Palmer is a good one because it gives us arbitrage off Mike Williams, or if Mike Williams gets hurt, we get Keenan Allen and Josh Palmer taking a big jump. And we do need a wide receiver. We got 10 seconds.
Do we like Tua at all, or do we want to go?
I would probably go to get the stack with Tua instead of. I would go with 2 quarterbacks then at that point. But it's a week 11 bye for the Packers too, is it? No, week 14. No. That's good.
I just had 2 up there because I like the stack, and I think that's maybe a nice pairing with Waddle.
Yeah, yep. No, so I would be thinking. I know we don't have an elite quarterback, but between that pairing, I think we'll get enough elite weeks to try and bolster together that scoring. Like I don't know about you. I'm happy if I have those 2 guys currently stacked with the late stacking options that can be added into them to go with 2 quarterbacks there to give us some flexibility, because tight end is obviously the area where we're going to have to make some moves here.
Yeah, so I would say because we are only going 4 running backs, we do have flexibility to grab another late QB, and it's not really hurting us. Because with this build, like, I don't know, from a tight end perspective, like I definitely want to consider Bob Tunyon. Give that stack for Rodgers. There's a bunch of other guys that I like. So like I'm not really too upset, but we still definitely need 3. But like we have options to look through. Like, hey, if Daniel Jones falls for value, if Mac Jones falls for value, I'm trying to think who else do we have as stack partners from earlier on. If you really wanted to grab elites, let's see who. If you could,
Marcus Mariota.
We could do Mariota probably.
I was just saying, who else do we have from the stack partners from
Pickett,
the late?
we could do Pickett. He's had an okay preseason.
Yeah. So, no, right now, I mean, Daniel Jones is probably the one.
Daniel Jones is the clear target.
Yeah.
We do have, this will put us under pressure because we're about to be on the clock, but Connor messages in, we have 10 seconds. The RV Best Ball stream never disappoints. That's usually where we're at with our picks. So we have 23 seconds at the moment. How are we feeling here with the options that we have available?
So Dotson gives us a Carson Wentz as well for a late 3rd QB, and I do love Jahan Dotson a lot here. I think we could probably still wait another round on tight end. Wide receiver really starts dropping after this.
I was going to say if there was a little bit of a tier here that we're looking at, I think there's kind of Watson slightly elevated above these other guys we have afterwards. So I like him there. He's had a very good, like, you want to talk about rookie receivers just having stellar camp reports and everything. Like he's been receiving nothing but positive reports since he arrived at Washington. So if any of that holds up, I think he could be a tremendous value a lot in drafts, even in the 12th round here. I think he could be very good.
Yeah, and we didn't talk about this, so it may have been a little bit unintentional, but stacking 2 up with Waddle gives us Damian Harris then week 17 as a comeback in that game. I'm not, obviously he's injured at the moment, but Tyquan Thornton had been my way of targeting that Patriots offense really late. But Parker obviously goes off the board. This is a range where Jacoby Myers goes. Have you any interest in those wide receivers? Obviously, it probably plays in potentially Hunter Henry as a potential option, depending on how the draft plays out at tight end. But how are you dissecting that? I've just been Tyquan Thornton and nothing else.
Yeah, so I mean, Thornton's a sad one because collarbone, that's going to be like up to 10 weeks. So definitely undraftable now, but liked him as a decent, value in that 18th earlier.
Yeah.
I think Jacoby Myers is the clear number one in that offense. And if they actually are more pass heavy than we are expecting, then he could have a pretty strong season. After that, it really feels wishy-washy all across the board. Kendrick Bourne's running as the fourth wide receivers. Like, you don't really want to touch that, even though he has such a great best ball build. Parker feels a bit too overpriced. So yeah, I mean, I think Hunter Henry. So I think like Lindank here is talking about the Jonnu season. My interpretation of the Jonnu Smith stuff this year is that the offense wants to use the tight ends. Henry was hurt for a lot of the preseason, so Jonnu was getting those touches in preseason. It makes Jonnu look good, so people start hyping up Jonnu. But in reality, it makes me just like Hunter Henry more because I think that from a schematic, like it's the tight end is still a core part of this offense as a pass catching. Just because Henry was hurt for those early games and Jonnu got a little, momentum, that doesn't overweigh what we saw the entire season where Jonnu was dust and Henry was the guy. So Jonnu as a 20th round tight end, no problem with it. Go for it. But Henry, in my mind, is still the guy.
Yeah, and looking back at last year, like the way I would have looked at it is they were using two completely different ways. They were trying to use Jonnu Smith kind of from between the 20s to the 20s, not using it very much, but that's where they were using him. And then we were seeing in the situation that Hunter Henry was getting those end zone targets, and they were targets where if he caught it, he was in the end zone. It wasn't like catch it 5 yards out and make your way in. So they're the sort of targets, particularly in best ball, where in this format, tight end touchdowns are going to be so important. Christian Watson could have been a target for us. He goes off the board there. Is Watson or those players that you're trying to target, off the Packers, Justin?
Yeah, so I mean, especially with when we have Rodgers I actually don't draft that much of, probably just because I'm not drafting like Emmy Lazard. So in this spot, 153, Hunter Henry probably makes the most sense with that week 17 correlation and filling our position of need.
Yeah, I think it's either Henry or stacking Gesicki with Tua.
It's either option. I think Henry's probably the better bet, but I'm happy to go with either of them.
Go for the Gesicki. It is really better to have your whole correlation for the entire season versus that 1 week 17. But yeah, I'm down on Gesicki, and Silva's very down on Gesicki, and he's been
he's been run blocking for the preseason.
Yeah, good blocker.
But there is always things that teams will want you to see in the preseason, and there's other things then that when it gets to week 1 that will be like, oh, that offense didn't look anything like what we thought it was going to look like. That happens pretty much every season. So it could be a case that we see, but the problem is now with Twitter and with cell phones and so on, with cameras, we see the practices as well. And if it's a case where it's just not been worked on at all, it's not like they're doing it in the cafeteria at the training facility. So, I am concerned with Gesicki. And you mentioned the Rodgers element. I'm really only drafting somebody like Tonyan or Gesicki and stacks that I have 2 or Rodgers. They're really the only situations that I'm doing it in. But we'll see how it plays out.
Well, and so, I think it's interesting because Gesicki and Alberto have similar situations where like they played a ton in the preseason, and the way that we see them being played is not in the situation for Gesicki. He's being used more as that blocker. And then the quotes come out afterwards. It's like, hey, his new role as a tight end is he's going to have to be doing both of these. And so that at least gives me some level of confidence that he's going to be on the field. He's not going to be used as a wideout as we basically saw in past seasons, but like, I do think like there's some value that eventually you just got to start taking him. The Albert O, again, it's like, okay, he started the game, he played into the 4th, but maybe they just want to see more snaps. He's still a young guy. So like, I think there's a level of overreaction around the preseason that we need to kind of temper our expectations. And look at that. We still get our Hunter Henry.
I was going to say that. I think this is a pretty easy pick here.
There is the option. If you want to go Henry, the only thing I'll say is we do have Aaron Rodgers with just Aaron Jones at the moment if we did want to go with Tonyan. And the other guy that I do like there's Gerald Everett. So I'll let you go with 10 seconds, but food for thought.
I like Henry. I think there's other ways we can still get Packers.
Okay.
I like that. And we're getting a little ADP value on Hunter Henry as well. And who knows? Maybe Tonyan actually falls back to us.
There is that possibility as well.
All right. So quick
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah,
let's head us with the team, Zach. And the other question I was going to say, I teased it again. You mentioned your tight end take when we were around the Kittle point. Do you remember what the take was back at that time? Because it is like 30 minutes ago.
Yeah, so the Kittle was just that for me with where we were at that time. If you didn't grab Kittle, you were setting yourself up for basically definitely a 3 tight end and potentially a 3 QB build, which is not that comfortable early on. So when Kittle almost fell to us at the 6th, not almost fell, but it was a possibility, I would have rather said, hey, okay, I'm willing to take my Kittle here because it gives me now flexibility of going with a comfortable 2 tight end build. And now I can figure out QBs. Either I can go 2 or 3. When you're not getting Kittle there, I'm not in the Hawkinson camp as you are. So I'm like, okay, now I'm waiting until the end of the draft to grab my 3 tight ends. And if we were going to go with a 5 RB build, 3-5-7-3 is not a fun lineup when you don't have any elite wide receivers. So Thankfully we were able to get the 4 RBs. That gives us at least 8 wide receivers. And we actually end in a spot where we may only need 2 QBs. So like 8 or 9 wide receivers, we feel a lot better. We adjusted.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, and I thought that might have been where you were going with it. I also think when we look back now, I would like to have Kittle in this lineup, but we went Keenan Allen, Jalen Waddle, Deontay Johnson, Drake London, and then Kadarius Toney. But we would only have the 4 wide receivers through that point. If we do that, then we're probably pushing ourselves a little bit, maybe on the Edwards-Helaire and Damian Harris picks to look towards wide receivers. So it might play out okay for us, but yeah, definitely the logic. And I do think when you pass on that elite tight end or when you pass on that elite quarterback and you go into that, Rodgers, Cousins, Tua, Fields tier, your build is flipped. That was something you also talked about at the Expo is, adapting to the draft and changing that overall build. So I think we're in a pretty good spot here as we try and round things out. Zach, what's your thoughts?
Right now I'm trying to galaxy brain a couple things in this queue here and think through a few things that maybe I can pitch to us coming up here. We just lost Sammy Watkins. I was kind of hoping maybe we could get him for Aaron Rodgers stack. We still have Matt Randall Cobb, but he's way down there. Tight ends, we have a couple guys who I like. I went ahead and put Noah Fant in the queue. I'll refresh it in a second, but we do have Noah Fant. I've also kind of workshopped in my mind a little bit of I can say it here. No one should take him. I'd be on taking Mac Jones here for a 3rd quarterback. I'd just say that.
And we have the week 17 correlation aspect. We have the Hunter Henry and the Damian Harris. So Tunyon is gone.
Yeah, so for me here, it's Fant or Jones. So I'll let you go and decide, Justin.
Mac Jones will probably not fall back to us. Fant either. I'm good with the Mac Jones. You were mentioning it. It makes sense. I don't love just Rodgers and Tua as QBs, and the QB position is so valuable. Is so much more valuable on Underdog than the tight end. So if anything, I'm willing to. Hey, maybe we take that Hayden Hurst. Maybe we actually go with a Taysom Hill aspect for that 3rd tight end.
Isaiah Likely. You hear he's in the Hall of Fame. Did you know?
It's impressive.
Did you see when we did the Hall of Fame tour when we were in Canton? I actually was shocked to see his bust was already on display.
Yeah, Colm took a selfie with the Isaiah Likely bust. It was pretty amazing.
I saw his card. You know how they had all the 1st-round draft cards too? You had to go in the back rooms, but they had his back there too. So
yeah, the VIP experience.
It was a special, just pure gold edition of the card that they had stacked back there. We do have potentially an option here to get the guy that we were talking about at the last pick. We're 2 picks away. We'll see how it plays out here. That will be quite nice. But
there is another tight end who just was activated off the pup list. His ADP might rise a little bit. I wouldn't be out on Logan Thomas either at this spot here. His ADP.
I always love the boots on the ground takes down in Washington from Zach when we get to this point.
We get them all.
But who's going to be laughing?
Because we heard nothing on Logan Thomas for the past, 2 months or so. And so to get the report that he's not going to start on the pup, I think that's extremely important.
Yeah, it'd be a reach on ADP, but
right. Noah Fant, Noah Fant, I think is an absolute smash in this spot. There's some risk that he's playing behind Will Dissly, and that their coach is an old 70-year-old man who plays football like it's still the 1900s. Yeah. But Noah Fant's talent, he's got to be able to. he's got to be on the field. He's got to win that job. It's a highly concentrated offense when they are passing, even though that's not often. Maybe they pick up the pace a little this year from last year. Just too much of a value.
My tight end takes are probably quite concentrated on certain players, but I mentioned earlier veteran tight ends that I'm happy to go with a 2 tight end build, and I would be willing to push Everett and Fant to a 2 tight end build if I got both of those guys. That's how high I am on both of those. I think Fant is going at a ridiculous spot currently. I think he just has that quarterback battle kind of smell all over him, but I made the case earlier for Hawkinson, and I think at the time you mentioned that what's the difference in Hawkinson and Fant may have been the comparison you said, but both of those guys went right beside each other in the NFL draft, both elite talents. I just think it's crazy where Fant is going at this particular moment in time. If we look at Alberto, who was the understudy to Fant last year, and then we have Fant himself, who obviously got traded to Seattle, the gap here of four rounds is a bit crazy. So glad to get him there. Really locks up our tight end spot. So we have 2 selections left. We're kind of set at quarterback, set at running back, set at tight end. I think we're looking purely at wide receiver here. Is that right, Justin?
Randall Cobb and Cedric Wilson.
So
sorry for interrupting on you, Zach. The question was, you said Sammy Watkins went as if it was a bad thing. I think being a Packers fan, like I always talk, I put a discount on all these Packers players. They should be going much later. But what's your thoughts on the dusty Packer receivers outside of those 2 rookies? Are you willing to draft them both if you don't have Aaron Rodgers and then if you do have Aaron Rodgers?
I haven't been doing it without. However, I think Sammy Watkins, his rate, he could be a screaming value where he's being drafted. I mean, both Randall Cobb and Sammy Watkins can. So, I definitely don't hate it. I think if I'm grabbing Rodgers, I definitely want to kind of target one of those, if not both. I think we have so little confidence of what that offense is truly going to look like, other than pretty much the roles of Aaron Jones and Aaron Jones and then AJ Dillon. And so I'm willing to just take that uncertainty. But it feels like, what's the ADP? Is Cedric Wilson maybe a little higher? Maybe we'd grab Wilson, then Cobb. I don't know if there's any other wide receivers that are oh, that's a streaming value that's just dropping right now. But yeah.
I had a Galaxy Brain wide receiver play, but I don't want to pitch it too soon. So,
okay.
But we're set up for it. I'll say that much. As long as we don't lose it, I'd be inclined to go Cobb here with this first pick, just so I can make my Galbrain play pitch on the come around if we're good with Cobb at this pick.
And Zach has built up a lot of credit on his Galbrain plays after the Brian Robinson takes from earlier this offseason. That's what he's going to hang his hat on for at least 2022.
Yeah.
I was right on Brian Robinson. We'll see when week 1 starts then what happens. We also did see Isaiah Likely go ahead there. Just went to the round. Yeah, went to the Dulcich drafter as well, who I'm drafting Dulcich quite a bit. He also did Kyle Pitts, so he's loading up. We see the option to get Cobb. Do you want to go Cobb?
I like Cobb, and I'd love to just look at the wide receivers we have available here.
So let me just say my Galbrain play is this guy, because there's been a lot of good camp news on him
wide receiver one.
Wide receiver Ty Montgomery. There's been some Patriots boots on the ground reports that he's actually been working a lot in the receiver down role. He even had a little bit of work in the preseason, rotating with the other top 2 backs. Obviously, he's a running back who's listed as a wide receiver here, but given what we have with Hunter Henry and Mac Jones, knowing that we also have Tyquan Thornton out and that's kind of a limited wide receiver room, Ty Montgomery would be my play as maybe the guy that's going to catch, what if he catches 6 or 7 balls a week for 50 yards and manages to score once in a while? But my other question would be, is there enough upside there where if he's not scoring touchdowns, is he going to be worth the play?
Well, based on him being designated as a wide receiver, I think that's interesting on Underdog that he is, because he has been a running back for the last couple of seasons. But it would pair obviously with the Mac Jones element, which would give us. It would also pair with the Tua Dolphins element, so it could fit into that part as well. I'm not against it. Me and Siegel drafted Ty Montgomery in the last round of our $125 draft recently, so. I'm not against it.
Yeah, and I do like Cedric Wilson for what it's worth. I was just wondering, do we want to keep going Dolphins? Do we want to maybe consider Patriots receivers who might see a little bit more work than Wilson? Where are you at with this, Herzig?
I mean, the Ty Montgomery is really interesting. I definitely get all of your logic. I think my challenge with him is I just don't see the upside case.
Which I think is what's kind of holding me back there too.
Right. So like in one game, he could maybe pick up like a 15 or an 18, but like I don't see him having a breakout. There are a couple other guys here that I do like. And so I think Cedric Wilson, you get the correlation. I think someone like David Bell could, we get the correlation with Jahan Dotson, and he has actual ASB breakout potential.
In this range, he has the true breakout potential out of all the players that are kind of, obviously I mentioned Thornton, but injured at the moment. But when we look through this list, he's the true breakout. How do you feel though? If we want correlation, we have to take one of the others. If we want to take the best player here,
name your guy. 5 seconds.
Yeah, and David Bell has the Washington bring back. And so just like Rashad Penny, ASB, that could be important enough in that week 17 to move the needle. But yeah, for me as well, like, yes, you want the correlation without a doubt. But when you have a player who's fallen to the 18th round that literally has breakout potential, like Cedric Wilson is not
his massive potential.
Breakout. Yeah.
Like Cedric Wilson at this point is, is at least wide receiver 3 at best in that particular offense. And I think that they are going to run the ball a huge amount. They're going to try and follow that 49ers recipe. So I think that Bell just has the massive breakout upside as a rookie heading in here. And I think with Deshaun Watson, in that case, he has been discounted quite considerably at that particular point of the draft. The buzz just isn't there. So we will recap our draft. There are a couple of picks left to go here, but Zach, take it away with how you think we look here after our draft.
I honestly, I really like the way all of this shaped up. I thought that our Herzig mentioned earlier on that we've kind of got a 4 wide receiver build that we didn't fully expect to see. I think there's a lot of value to be had in that. Even just Dalvin, Aaron Jones, and Damian Harris. I think there's a case to be made that those are obviously the first 2 guys that they could be easily top 12. I think there's a case for Damian Harris to be top 15. And then Clyde Edwards-Helaire is, we know, the wild card, but he plays in a great offense that if he's able to capitalize on any kind of opportunities, he could even potentially outplay his ADP. So I think the running back room is pretty awesome. And then I like the way that we were able to correlate some of our wide receivers with our other picks. I like that we were able to still kind of get some stacks put in there. So if I can find this team again, here it is. And we still ended up with a lot of players who I'm taking in other drafts, even if I'm not necessarily going a 3 quarterback, 3 tight end build with all my drafts. So for what we did, and I think maybe getting a little bit different than how I usually draft with the overall roster construction of a 3-4-8-3 build, I'm really happy with how this turned out. I think it looks very solid.
Yeah, so to run through the whole roster, we have Aaron Rodgers, Tua, Mac Jones, then we took Dalvin Cook, Aaron Jones, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and Damian Harris at running back. And the one thing I'd point out there with the guys you mentioned is when we do a 0 running back team, we're hoping to get basically 5 of the top 15 wide receivers, but there is a case there that those 4 guys could all finish the season as top 24 running backs. So there's a huge amount of upside built in, even though, as I mentioned during it, Harris and Edwards-Helaire aren't players that I'm heavily drafting so far. Then we have at wide receiver Keenan Allen, Jalen Waddle, Deontay Johnson, Drake London, Kadarius Toney, Jahan Dotson, Randall Cobb, David Bell. I think there's enough veteran and rookie and second-year upside built into that roster to survive there. And then we also have Mike Gesicki, Hunter Henry, and Noah Fant. So we have quite a bit of team stacks for the 3 quarterbacks built in and the end up. How are you feeling, Justin, about that roster after we go from the 108 slot?
Yeah, man, I'd say I never feel fantastic when I don't have an elite QB or elite tight end, and you end up with this 3-3. But for what we did, I think we piecemealed it pretty decently. We're likely not going to be winning at the quarterback or tight end position. But with only having 4 RBs, we could still end up with the best RB core in the room, which I think is great. And then with wide receivers, we really went for, some strong, high target volume guys at the very top. With really all 5 of our top ones are expected to have more than 100 targets, and just great options there. And then we complement them with some upside in Dotson, with some upside in David Bell, and just the wide range of outcomes with Randall Cobb. So overall, I would say for a 3 with a 3 threes and the onesies build, I think we did pretty well. Overall, I would say I like it. I like it. it's just hard. It's hard to love when you don't have an elite QB or elite tight end that like, hey, this player can really finish as a top 3 at that position and win that position for me.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it is a little bit different to what we would normally do, but you do sometimes have to have some different tickets in the lottery when it comes to it. So I think it's pretty well constructed overall for what we had to try and achieve. Can you pull up the draft board, Zach? I just want to, there's a question here about late round flyers. I just want to see who went at the end. We also have a comment coming in here from Death Dealers. He says, I got to ask the room though, 30 plus watching and only 9 likes. So that's probably down to me as well, not asking to hit that like button, but make sure you are subscribed, hit that like button. We have another one of these coming up. Myself and Zach are teaming up with Pat Doherty over the next couple of days. He will be joining us on Thursday at noon Eastern, 5 p.m. UK and Ireland. So you don't want to miss that. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. When we looked through, the question that did come in was any late round flyers worth mentioning. So the 18th round. So we were talking about potentially having to pair those together. I don't know how you feel, but I am really targeting as third tight ends, those rookie tight ends, and not something that I normally talk about because it usually takes a year or two for rookies to come in. But I do think that both Dulcich and McBride are of a significant quality. Obviously, we've seen Likely get a lot of buzz over the last couple of days. I have talked about the Trey McBride scenario as if it was a 0 running back team. You could say this too about Greg Dulcich, but you're looking at that kind of player in front of the running back position who could fall and the potential for the second option to become that smash, to become the regular starter. I think with McBride and Dulcich, we could see that both with Albert Okwuegbunam and particularly Zach Ertz. So we have a roster here from the 9th spot who has actually paired both those guys up in Ertz and Albert O. And I think those can put yourself into a little bit of a squeeze. They do have Moali Cox at the back, but my favorite guys at the back of the drafts are generally those rookie tight ends. We see Trey McBride go at the 1803 here. Have you any late round tight ends? You also touched on Taysom Hill. I don't know if he's a genuine target, but he went in the 19th round here. Logan Thomas, who Zach touched on, and he went in the 19th round as well. Greg Dulcich and Isaiah Likely going a little bit earlier. Somebody who I'm not drafting an underdog, but in the PPR or the tight end premium over at the FFPC, I've drafted Daniel Bellinger of the Giants a little bit as a third tight end late as well. Have you any guys there, Justin, you're looking to hit?
Yeah, what I found is on the 20 round sites like DraftKings and such, I'm more likely to really go for that third flyer who's just not getting drafted. For underdog, I usually find myself there's just spend another round ahead and you're getting Noah Fant in the 16th. For me, that gap between if you can get Noah Fant in the 16th, if you can get Higbee, Evan Ingram, all those guys in the 15th, get your tight end there and get your wide receiver or your running back flyer in the 18th.
There's so many more options yet at those positions.
Take a look at a draft board and tell me, okay, what's the difference really between Tyrion Davis-Price and Gus Edwards, or the guys that you're getting left. So when the running backs are so similar, okay, well then just take your tight end a little earlier. And same thing with wide receiver. What's the real difference here between Donovan Peoples-Jones and David Bell? Well, I like David Bell more. It's literally a coin flip. So let me spend a little more. So all that my point is just rather than focusing so much on a round 18 tight end flyer, get your tight end flyer in the 16th. That's not so much a flyer, and get your running back or wide receiver flyers where there's far more viable options in round 18.
Yeah, and when we talk elite tight ends as well, there's a lot of people will comment in on YouTube and send us, DMs on Twitter, and not to say, why are you going for these guys in the first 4 rounds when I can get 2 options in the double-digit rounds who are going to do the same? They are not going to do the same. Don't fool yourself into the fact that they're going to do the same. These tight ends are not all created equal, but I do definitely agree with when you're pitching up there to try and get your tight ends a little bit earlier and to fill it out. Show me team 12. Is that a 1 tight end build when we're talking about tight ends? I think it's a
team 12
Travis Kelce 1 tight end.
Only Travis Kelce.
I can say I haven't done a 1 tight end build this year yet. Have you done that, Justin?
The data supports that it's not really worth it. Even when you've got the tight end that is the tight end 1 in the season, even when Kelce had great seasons, it still was worthwhile to pair that with a round 16, 17, 18 tight end because that player can have a couple upsides for the spike, have a spike week for the flex spot, or in case you do have a week 2 injury, Kelce, whatever. Yeah. Especially Kelce this year, we've seen he had a decent amount of games last year where he just didn't smash. His upside in games is unreal, but if they're up a ton and they don't need him, they're not going to use him at his current age. So it doesn't matter how much you love Pitts or Andrews or any of them. The capital that it costs you to draft a second one in the 16th, 17th, and 18th is more important than you grabbing that Benjamin or Marvin Jones or whoever it was.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Team 12 is very interesting. Just looking more at it. They got one tight end, Henry, James Conner, Zeke. They basically did a 3 RB build until they put Benjamin in at the bottom there. They even really kind of did one quarterback. They got Jalen Hurts, which is great, but then their quarterback too is Davis Mills. They really just hammered the hell out of wide receivers in this one. So
sorry if this guy's
listening.
Sorry if this guy's listening in, but you've got to get that 4 running back build and also handcuff one of those running backs with your 20th round selection. It may not be optimal, but we'll see. They have drafted a lot of wide receivers, Zach. We should be happy about that. But this has been a lot of fun drafting with Justin. I'm glad we were able to do it. Justin, I mentioned that you're on Twitter at JustinHerzig, but you also are the co-founder of Own the Moment, the NFT element of things, and then you do some best ball stuff over at Establish the Run. What have you got going on? Obviously, this is a pretty hectic time of year for all of us. What have you got going on over the next couple of weeks that the listeners can check out?
It is fun. Lots going on. But honestly, just give me a follow on Twitter. Check it out there. You'll always stay abreast of everything that's going on. In 50 minutes, I'll be doing a best ball stream on the ETR channel, bringing on head of winning at Underdog, Jack Settleman. So I've been doing these twice a week. Always fun. Kind of similar to, what you guys were doing and just kind of talk through. And honestly, the number one thing that I've gained out of all these streams was just learning from various guests and all their takes and all their from both player as well as strategy, as well as just handling kind of structure stuff. It's been, been a great learning experience for me. And I know chat's really enjoyed it. So head over to Twitter or follow, in 50 minutes, head over to the Establish the Run YouTube channel and we'll be doing another draft there.
Yeah, if you're looking for more drafts, that's a pretty good plug. If you're watching this, you can jump over watch that as well. Because look, we all love watching drafts, we love drafting, but you mentioned the perfect element is you are going to learn from listening to different people. It's important not to just go into your echo chamber and just stick to all those views. There's always going to be points that you can take information out of. Zach, you can be found on Twitter at ZK_FFB. What have you got going on over the next couple of days?
I do college football content over at NBC Sports Edge, powered by Roto World as well. So I've got some college football content coming up for what they call Week 0. For those unfamiliar, it's a couple games that prelude the Week 1 season for college football. So I'm working on that, and then just getting a lot of things done over the next couple of days because I'm heading out on family vacation starting next Sunday. So. Vacation before the season fully gets into gear and just kind of wrapping things up. But college football content on tap for this week over at NBC Sports Edge.
And you can also find Brian Robinson propaganda over on Zach's Twitter feed. Mentioning college football is not my thing, but the college football season actually kicks off in Dublin, Ireland this week. Yes,
it does.
I have media accreditation for that, so I'm still deciding if I make the 3-hour journey down. But I think at this point that I'm getting very tempted just to take the trip down and catch a game. We don't get that opportunity very often. But thanks to everyone who has tuned into today's show. We've enjoyed it. Follow Justin on Twitter. Follow Zach. You can follow me as well if you want at Overtime Ireland. And until we are back on Thursday with Pat Doherty for another stream, have a good one.